Our exhibition titled Queer Fashion and Styles, Stories from the Heartland was mounted at Iowa State University's Textiles and Clothing Museum in the Mary Alice Gallery in 2018. Myself, Kelly Reddy Best, Dana Gooden, and Yolanda Sanders were the co-curators on the team. We are honored and thankful to have received the Richard Martin Award from the Costume Society of America for our work. I would just like to have a brief moment of silence for Dana Gooden, who tragically passed away in August 2020. Throughout my career, much of my work has centered around queer identities, fashion, and style. Oftentimes, when I use the word fashion, people get scared and they think, oh, I don't participate in that. In particular, many queer women that I have interviewed often say, oh, I don't have style or I'm not fashionable, which is one of the long standing stereotypes that queer women don't have style. But throughout this presentation today, I'm going to highlight the many ways queer identities are negotiated in everyday clothing and appearances of women living in the Midwest from the latter part of the 20th century until today. Throughout all of these examples, I'll show how all of the women featured have style or participate in fashion in different ways. The women's stories I'm going to talk about today reflect some of the long-standing ways queer women have fashioned their bodies. For example, the butch or femme dichotomy, in addition to other ways of negotiating identities, such as what it means to be genderqueer and then how this is reflected in sartorial choices. Numerous scholars have analyzed the history of style for queer women and have found evidence of styles unique to queer women. For example, in this image from the 1930s in a social club in Paris, there are same gender appearing couples negotiating styles that have some similarities to the experiences of the women I will discuss today. Therefore, this notion that our identities influence how we appear is a central theme throughout this work. This is not limited to sexuality, but includes sex, gender, race, ethnicity, ability, body size and shape, religion, and nation. And while these intersections are also important and apparent for the folks who we will discuss, we mainly focus on the intersections of sexuality, identity, and appearance. Past scholars have noted that many fashion professionals who identified in the LGBTQ plus communities influenced the world of style. Most notably, people often refer to the gay male fashion designer, but the individuals in the LGBTQ plus communities were also trendsetters themselves. For example, Marlene Dietrich, a bisexual woman, was once described as the best dressed man in Hollywood. And so her penchant for wearing men's clothing off screen as well as on had a profound influence on women's fashion, both in the 1930s when lesbian elegance was associated with tailored suits and trousers, and later when her look inspired other designers. Moving forward, we have Ellen DeGeneres, one of the very visible lesbian women in the 21st century. She's pictured here with her wife, Portia. They are two negotiating gender in both of their appearances and what we might associate with the butch femme dichotomy. However, the language shifts and changes, as do the styles. And so while these types of negotiations might be true for some, where one person might have a more masculine aesthetic and the other might have a more feminine aesthetic, there are many ways that women in the queer community negotiate their appearance through dress. But I might argue that one of the major ways sexuality is negotiated through appearance is through gender and gender presentations. It is certainly not always about gender or pushing gender boundaries, but that is certainly a recurring theme that has emerged throughout much of other scholars' work and our own work in this exhibition. In this research, we analyzed the recent history of style, fashion, dress through a queer lens by examining how queer identities have been negotiated in everyday styles and dress within the overarching cultural context of fashion by women in the Midwest of the US. We narrowed the exhibition to the Midwest. It's an area that has about 20% of the documented LGBTQ plus folks And so this decision was largely informed by the dearth of research available on Midwestern queer identity. Much of queer style, fashion, and dress history written to date has primarily focused on urban or um, high fashion aesthetics. And additionally, research focused on LGBTQ plus life in general has largely centered on Northwestern and Western regions of the US, while largely ignoring the Midwest. So this like bi-coastal emphasis or focused attention on places like New York, LA, San Francisco in the field of queer studies creates this imagined future where queer life cannot exist or thrive outside these enclaves. And so, therefore, there may be assumptions that are made resulting in impressions that mundane, ordinary suburban gay men or Midwestern lesbians are somehow less authentically gay than visible urban coastal gays and lesbians. So in this exhibition, we provide a historical narrative that follows a social constructivist orientation, which means largely that we acknowledge the complexities and the interconnected nature of multiple coexisting realities, rather than like an essential or like a totalizing a truth about what life is like authentically fashioning the body in the Midwest. Prior to the opening of our exhibition, there had been only a few museum-based exhibitions that focused solely on the intersection of queer identities and fashion, style, and dress. For example, the museum at FIT in New York City's A Queer History of Fashion from the Closet to the Catwalk. Their exhibition focused on mostly urban settings or on people of a higher socioeconomic status, or those deemed like the cultural tastemakers or gatekeepers, as well as prominent designers, both those either rumored or openly queer identifying. The Brighton Museum developed an exhibition titled Museum of Transology in 2017. And the curator, AJ Scott, included over 120 objects sourced from the public, where each trans donor included a handwritten tag describing the object's significance to their trans identity. Objects included range from a hospital gown, a lipstick tube, and a blood-stained chest binder. So the representation of marginalized identities in museums can be important for identity construction. So engaging with museum objects allows museum visitors to negotiate their identities through their selection or rejection of the objects on exhibit. So people who are members of communities with an abundance of representation can selectively view and negotiate their identities by engaging with the objects and corresponding stories while in the museum. But a lack of representation, however, lessens people's abilities to self-select positive aspects of their identities from the available narratives and objects. Additionally, invisibility buoys negative stereotypes and minimizes the prejudicial experiences those within marginalized identities must contend with on the everyday. So when marginalized identities and their histories are highlighted in museums, members of these communities can feel a positive sense of self and community. Yet, it can be quite challenging to find these stories and objects to represent these marginalized communities due to past collecting practices. And for this reason, we employed a qualitative research approach combined with the historical methods to collect and interpret objects, stories, and images for our research and exhibition. So we used purposive sampling to recruit folks through social media advertisements. And to be eligible, we asked that folks self-identify in the LGBTQ plus community, be at least 30 years of age or older, self-identify as a woman, including trans, cis, and assigned female at birth, non-binary folks, and that they reside in the Midwest. And the Midwestern states are marked here on the slide with hearts. Many of the women came from small towns from throughout the Midwest. And these are some photos here that Dana and I had taken when we traveled to the different individuals' houses. 10 queer women who are, some of which are pictured here, from age 30 to 50, completed semi-structured wardrobe interviews with us, and those focused on their personal styles. And then they loaned or donated garments or other objects for the exhibition and possible acceptance into the permanent collection. And throughout the 10 queer women's stories and histories, we were able to give an authentic voice to their garments in the exhibition, a voice that was entangled with different ways of being or becoming throughout their life experiences and detours. And this is a 2-minute video walkthrough of the exhibition that's in our 500 square foot gallery space. And by watching this, you can get an overall sense of the gallery and the vignettes and the exhibition and display. While several of the themes, such as fitting the stereotype, not queer enough, butch masculine of center, and feminine leaning high femme, appear to be in opposition to each other, many of the women fit into more than one of these seemingly contrasting themes. So the themes were constructed not to necessarily categorize the women, but to explore the entanglements as opposed to absolutes of identity and how conflicting meanings surface in their negotiations of appearance, something that is pretty tricky to communicate in a static museum exhibition. The section of the exhibition, Fitting the Stereotype, highlights the experiences of individuals who style themselves to appear overtly queer. Numerous women explicitly described or brought out example garments from their closets that they felt were stereotypical looks by someone in the queer community. So Cindy related a memory of an incident when people assumed that she was a lesbian because she wore particular items. She was wearing a thumb ring and Birkenstocks, which are pictured here on the slide, upon which her colleague had commented, "Oh man, you're an old school dyke." And so which Cindy replied, "No, I'm not. I don't have ill-fitting pants and I don't have short spiky hair." In the interview, when we were viewing Cindy's garments, she put together this outfit pictured here that she categorized as "quote pretty lesbian," which was comprised of one of her spare pairs of Birkenstocks, men's cargo shorts that she had DIY'd the crotch area numerous times, and a ripped and faded Chicago Bulls men's t-shirt. Leah Donna also told us she wore garments that fit the queer stereotype. In 2017, she went on a camping trip with a local online queer women's group, and she showed us a yellow and red flannel pictured here. And she said that she just had to wear it on the trip because she would, quote, fit right in. And so here you can see Leah Donna's smelling the shirt because she said it still smelled like the campfire on her lesbian trip. And the next slide, there's a short video of Maren discussing her experiences with stereotypical images and experiences.
That time, but I mean, the joke about the U-Haul and the flannel, that's how you identified lesbian neighborhoods. But the idea being I could wear jeans, I could wear ratty torn up Converse and a t-shirt and flannel, and I was comfortable finally in my own skin.
Brooke shared two images of herself wearing flannel and said her style definitely signified her sexuality. In one image, she played with her style in unique ways. She pushed gender norms by pairing her cropped flannel with suspenders and leather pants, all while showing her stomach as a fat, identifying genderqueer person. The mixing of styles had elements of appearing stereotypically queer, yet was also related to her gender identity as genderqueer, which incorporates concepts of masculinity, femininity, and androgyny in a shifting and complex way. In some instances, individuals who are members of the queer community feel like outsiders or feel that they do not belong because their personal style does not clearly show their queerness or sexual identity in a stereotypical way. In the garments featured in this section of the exhibition, Not Queer Enough, the women had a more feminine aesthetic in their presentation and were often assumed to be straight, sometimes making them feel they had to prove their sexuality in other ways. So, for example, Emma's strapless jumpsuit made from a red woven fabric with a floral metallic pattern made others in the queer community question her belonging. And so on the next slide, we have a short clip of Emma describing her experiences with this garment.
Any kind of like any attempt to ever butch it up has just been so unsuccessful, and I just feel so weird. Not quite like dressing in drag, but I just feel so bizarre that I think that the one thing that I can like point to would be my visible body hair. And so like if I were going somewhere, and so a couple of years ago I was at the Philly Trans Health Conference that happens every year. It used to happen in June and they've changed the time. So I was going to the big, like massive queer dance party that they have that weekend when trans health is happening. And I was wearing, I really love jumpsuits and onesies, and I was wearing this, it's like maroon shorts and strapless jumpsuit with all this like gold lame all over it, and really dark maroon lipstick, and I looked like ridiculously hot. And I was going to this party and I asked this group of people like for directions to the club, and it was this group of like queer folks. I went up and I was like, hey, I'm looking for the party at Single Cycle or whatever it was called. And they were like, and this group of people were like, you know that's a gay club, right? And I was like, yeah, I know it's a gay club. And they were like, okay, but like everyone there is gay. And I was like, yeah, and so am I. Like I'm going to that club. And this was like, these people were supposed to be family, you know, they were like supposed to know. And they're saying to me, it's a gay club, everyone there is gay. And I was like, yeah, I'm gay. I'm a gay person. And I remembered like, I shouldn't have had to like prove it to anyone. I'm just over like proving anything to anyone. Fuck, I don't have time for that anymore. But I like lifted up my arms because I have like 2 chinchillas under my armpits, and I was like, look, these are like, see, I'm gay. Like, no self-respecting straight woman would have all of this body hair, you know? And they were kind of like, oh, it was like the passport, or like I just needed something, you know? Yeah. So this is what I was wearing the night at that queer party, where I was apparently not passing enough to be welcomed into that space.
Some participants adopted more masculine aesthetics and more masculine style shoes and garments, which are represented in the masculine center butch theme. And here are a variety of swimsuits worn by Cindy, Kai, and then also Leah Donna. Kai, who predominantly shops in the men's sections of stores, said she loves cargo shorts or pants or anything with a lot of like pockets. So she loaned us this outfit on the left. And another outfit loaned for the exhibition was a white button-down shirt, a light blue tie, and a pair of blue dress pants, which is pictured here. The dress pants had cargo pockets on each side of the leg, positioned right at the knee. And so Kai had like laughed as she showed us the pants and felt they, quote, like had to go in because to the exhibition because they were emblematic of her style. And so on the next slide, we have a short clip of Kai discussing her experiences as a queer masculine appearing person.
And to always kind of be on the front lines, like, again, 1,000 times a day or 100 times a day, I might be in an environment where I have to make that split-second choice about whether to say the word spouse or wife, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's, I'm either coming out or not coming out when I do that. But because it's an automatic assumption, and because I look the way that I do, I don't always get to make that choice. And there are days when I don't want to carry the sword. Mm-hmm. There are days when I do want to just use, I don't want to have to make a declaration. I'm gay, or I'm married to a woman, or there are days when I'm just tired and I just want to be able to easily move through this interaction and move on. Mm-hmm. And I can't because of the way I look.
And then in the next short video, it features Jennifer also discussing her experiences appearing as a queer masculine person.
That was a constant battle. Probably by the time I was in second or third grade, I started, she would still dress me, and but I had clothing that I had in a cooler in the garage, and so I'd go out the front door and then I'd circle back and go in the back door of the garage and change clothes and then go to school. And you know, sometimes I'd remember to put the other clothes on and sometimes I wouldn't. And my mom had 4 younger siblings, and so she didn't really notice. But it was probably 6th grade, 7th grade, maybe, before I started to be able to wear what I wanted. Mm-hmm. So my dad finally got tired of us fighting about it, and he was just like, just let her wear what she wants.
Thanks for bringing out so many photos. I love
Oh,
this.
yeah.
This is great.
Here I am at the birthday. I'm very cute.
Would you say your mom chose that?
Yes, I'm a year old, yeah. She chose that.
Oh, there's some 1-year-olds, you know, who are.
And this is one of my very favorite. I picked this outfit out.
Mm-hmm. And
This is my grandma.
Oh, your grandma.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved those white jeans and that belt buckle.
Mm-hmm.
And that happening jean jacket.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. It's one of my most favorite outfits. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sort of mint green shirt with the stuff at the top.
Many women in the queer community embody a feminine aesthetic, which historically has been referred to as femme. And so some interviewees whose garments were displayed in the high femme or feminine leaning theme used the term femme or high femme to describe their style. And this like showed a connection to the traditional butch femme dichotomy rooted in the 1950s. And so some of these women also related that they knew they did not appear overtly gay or lesbian, but that any other aesthetic mostly did not feel right to them. And so when Caitlin showed us different garments from her closet, she referred to one particularly feminine garment, and she said, I like the hyper femme stuff. I like the buttons on this one because they're fancy. And she continued that most of her stuff was really feminine, and she thought it was really important to include that in the exhibition, indicating that she's aware of some of the stereotypes. And these are 2 pairs of shoes from this vignette. And then here is an image of some of them showing us garments from their various closets. In contrast to the more famous descriptor lipstick lesbian, some women have embraced chapstick lesbian to represent their connection to a masculine aesthetic, which reflects the complexity and variation of queer identities. And so a motorcycle helmet and tube of chapstick were displayed in this theme and supplied by Cindy and Jennifer, who playfully used the term to self-identify. However, in her interview, Jennifer also used the term soft butch, dyke, and was not sure if she could pull off total butch. But at the end of the interview, though, she jokingly showed us her supply of chapsticks, which is like pictured there on the slide. And while laughing, she insisted we included a tube in the exhibition, which we did. The exhibition section, Overtly Proud, highlighted garments that reflected physical and online spaces where the women featured in our exhibition and other IO queer community members felt empowered to express their sexuality, such as pride festivals, temporary queer spaces, and social media groups. And here's the assortment of objects that were featured in this vignette. A gray t-shirt with the text hashtag LOIA represents a Facebook group called Lesbians of Iowa. And Anita, one of the founders of the group, describes it as a journey to finding community, then kind of taking it a step further and doing things like meetups and events, which encourages the broad community in Iowa to connect, but also local communities as well. So Anita noted that during our conversation that many of the women in the group are in rural towns across Iowa, making it difficult to find and connect with folks like themselves. They wanted to create a space where people can feel that they are not alone and that they are accepted. The exhibition section celebrating ceremony featured educational and religious garments with queer signifiers, such as rainbow colors. And these objects showed the importance of representing identities in times of accomplishment and at formal ceremonies for the queer women and other community members interviewed for the exhibition. The university graduation and religious stoles that visually represent membership in the queer community are especially empowering, given the history of exclusion and oppression that has plagued both faith-based and educational institutions. Jennifer wore a red stole created by her mother-in-law for her ordination ceremony. On the red stole, underneath the embroidered rainbow butterfly, are the embroidered words Imago Dei, translated from Latin as "in God's image." The subtext of the rainbow butterfly was one way to highlight the connection between Jennifer's sexual identity and her faith, both for herself and for those who might be like, quote, in the know. The real or imagined notions of everyday queer style within a geographic space, such as the Midwest, served as a space to enact tensions between communities, styles, and aesthetics, both queer and straight. So we argue then that all style is largely a shifting queer style when enacted through embodied practices of queer folks, even if those styles were thought to be straight. So through the analysis of images, memories, and artifacts, we disentangled what it means to be and look queer from a historical lens, and that these styles all engage in the process of being or becoming temporarily queer on queer bodies. If you'd like to see more about the exhibition, you can visit our digital catalog online and view all of the contents. You can look at the introduction about the exhibition and all the various vignettes with the different objects and the objects descriptions. Or you can also read about the exhibition in the previous issue of Dress, where we had published about the research completed for the exhibition. And lastly, a special thank you to all of the folks who helped make this exhibition possible. Thank you very much.